For over 2,000 years, the lost city of Atlantis has captivated the human imagination. Its story is one of power, wealth, and tragedy. And though it may be best known today through the spiritual teachings of one man, its roots can actually be traced back to a classical Greek philosopher named Plato. According to his written account, Atlantis was an actual historical place. But how much truth is there to his tale? Did the powerful kingdom of Atlantis really exist? Or is it all just a fantastical myth? In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the subject, exploring both sides of the argument in search of an answer. We'll be looking at everything from ancient texts to new scientific discoveries to see if any shred of evidence exists that proves Atlantis really did exist. So join us as we journey through time in search of the lost city of Atlantis. The most important thing to remember about Atlantis is that the only reason we know about it at all is because of Plato. In fact, we don't have any archaeological evidence proving its existence because no physical remains have ever been uncovered. He first mentioned the city in a 360 BC dialogue called Timaeus, where he described it as an actual historical place that had once existed off the coast of the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato claimed that 9,000 years before his own time, there had been a great naval battle between the Atlanteans and the combined forces of Greece and Egypt, which took place near the island of Tinos. During this battle, the Greeks were nearly defeated by the Atlanteans, who came from what Plato called the Western Ocean. They were driven back to the Egyptian coast by the Atlanteans, but they managed to regroup and win the war. After this, the Athenians became so afraid of another attack from the Atlanteans that they never ventured out to sea again. According to Plato, Atlantis was situated in the Atlantic Ocean, but sank beneath the waves around 11,000 years before his own time. He describes it as being larger than Libya and Egypt put together, surrounded by a vast ocean, and ringed by mountains, rivers, and lush vegetation. Most importantly, though, was its population. Plato claimed that the Atlanteans were an advanced race of people who lived according to strict laws and customs that made them both powerful and prosperous. However, they eventually became corrupted by their own greatness and were punished by the gods. As a result, Atlantis was plunged into the sea and its people vanished forever. There are many parts of Plato's story that sound convincing. For example, he talks about the Atlanteans having advanced technology and being extremely wealthy, which could explain why so little trace of them remains today. After all, if they truly were that advanced, then they probably had some way of protecting their cities from prying eyes or erasing themselves from history entirely. It's also interesting that Plato claimed Atlantis was located in the Atlantic Ocean because this part of the world is largely unexplored compared to other areas like the Mediterranean Sea. Could it be possible that such a large city could have existed here without us knowing about it? Maybe, but it seems highly unlikely. Despite this intriguing possibility, however, most historians today agree that Plato, his story, is nothing more than a philosophical allegory meant to teach a lesson about the dangers of unchecked ambition. There simply isn't enough concrete evidence to prove that Atlantis really did exist. Right. But what about the pieces of evidence that do seem to support the existence of Atlantis? One of the biggest pieces of evidence for the existence of Atlantis is the fact that Plato took great pains to make sure his description of the city was as realistic as possible. He goes into great detail about its geography, climate, and even the layout of its streets. If this wasn't a real place, then why would he bother to include all this information? It seems unnecessary if Atlantis was just a figment of Plato's imagination. Another piece of evidence comes from Egyptian priests who supposedly told Plato that their records contained references to Atlantis. Unfortunately, none of these records have survived, but it's possible they could shed light on whether or not the city really did exist. Perhaps one day new discoveries will uncover these lost writings and give us more insight into Plato's story. But perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence comes from the Santorini island an archipelago located in the Aegean Sea between Greece and Turkey. According to legend, the city of Atlantis was destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption, and recent studies have shown that this is exactly what happened on Santorini around 1650 BC. This eruption was so powerful that it sent ash and pumice across the Mediterranean, causing widespread destruction. Could this have been the event that Plato was referring to when he wrote about the destruction of Atlantis? Maybe. The timeline fits perfectly, and the physical evidence does seem to match up as well. However, there are some problems with this theory. For one thing, Santorini is an archipelago, not a single island, and Plato clearly stated that Atlantis was a single island. Additionally, the Santorini Islands were never completely submerged underwater, even after the massive eruption. Plato also claimed that the Atlanteans were skilled sailors and traders, which doesn't seem likely, given that they would have had to contend with dangerous currents and unpredictable weather patterns common to the Aegean Sea. Furthermore, according to Plato, Atlantis was located in the Atlantic Ocean, yet Santorini is in the Mediterranean, far from the open sea. This alone makes it seem highly unlikely that Santorini could be the location of Atlantis. Still, this hasn't stopped some people from trying to connect the two. One popular theory is that Atlantis was actually a group of islands that were once connected but were separated by the massive volcanic eruption. Another theory is that Atlantis was located further out to sea than Plato suggested, and that it sank deeper into the water after the eruption of Thera, making it even harder to find. Perhaps one day, new discoveries will uncover evidence to support these theories. It's also worth noting that Plato wasn't the only one who believed in the existence of Atlantis. For centuries, people around the world have shared stories of a lost civilization that sank beneath the waves. These myths and legends may have been inspired by Plato's original story, but they could also point to a real historical event that has been lost to time. So, is there any truth to the legend of Atlantis? Well, unfortunately, there's just not enough hard evidence to say for sure. Most historians agree that Plato's version is likely a myth, but that doesn't mean there wasn't a civilization somewhere that inspired his story. Perhaps one day new discoveries will be made that will shed more light on this mysterious lost city. Until then, we can only speculate and wonder what really happened to Atlantis. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.